You're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Joshua and Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Cecil Taylor, his biography, and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums of all time. The first one's called Conquistador, released in 1966. This one is a beast. Sextet again, but now you got Bill Dixon on trumpet, and the way the brass meshes with Taylor's piano, insane. The album dives deep into free jazz, but it's not just noise. It's this huge, expansive structures and improvisations that almost feels like storms you can ride through. Now, rewind a bit to Nefertiti, the Beautiful One has come from 1962. This is one of those transitional gems. It's a trio with Jimmy Leons and Andrew Cyril, and the vibe is more lyrical and introspective than some of his earlier, more jagged stuff. Tracks like Trance and Call are gorgeous examples of Taylor evolving. Still complex, still adventurous, but there's this really emotional, almost meditative quality. If you're exploring Taylor and want a slightly more accessible entry point, this album is a perfect starting point. Fast forward to Student Studies, released in 1973, and now we're back at that raw, fiery Taylor energy, but in a trio setting again. This one's got spontaneous improvisations and intricate rhythms that are just thrilling. It's energetic, unpredictable, and gives you a peek right into his creative mind. Critics love it because it balances structured ideas with totally free-flowing inventiveness. So basically, these three albums, Conquistador, Nefertiti, and Student Studies, show different facets of Taylor. The bold ensemble architect, the introspective lyricist, and the brilliant improviser. On this week's episode, it's about Cecil Taylor, his biography, and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums of all time. The first one's called Conquistador, released in 1966. Conquistador is often seen as a sister album to Unit Structures, but it's got its own vibe. The sextet here includes the amazing Bill Dixon on trumpet, Dixon's brass against Cecil's volcanic piano. That's electricity right there. The way those trumpet lines cut through Cecil's dense piano clusters feel like sparks flying in a storm. Musically, it's pure free jazz territory again. Huge, expansive structures, long stretches of group improvisation where it sounds like everyone is pushing at the edges of possibility. But the difference from Unit Structures is that this album feels even more urgent, almost cinematic in scope. Conquistador, the title track, is this massive sprawling piece where the band builds wave after wave of sound, cresting and crashing like an ocean. Then you've got Aphrodisia, which leads into this emotional intensity, less about melody, more about feeling pouring out of the horns, the drums, Cecil's piano explosions. And the performance, it's jaw-dropping. Everyone is at the peak of their technical powers, but it's not about showing off, it's about channeling all that energy into this group improvisation that feels both chaotic and perfectly alive. Cecil's at the center, but he's not back in the spotlight. He's like the architect, throwing out structures and letting everyone stretch them to the breaking point. Accessibility-wise, this is deep water. Like, you can't just throw it on the background and expect it to make sense. But if you sit with it, if you allow yourself to immerse in the density, it's incredibly rewarding. It's the kind of album where you hear something new every time you go back. Critics pretty much canonized Conquistador as a free jazz masterpiece, and honestly, it deserves it. Together with Unit Structures, it cemented Cecil Taylor as one of the most radical voices in jazz, someone who wasn't just playing the piano but reinventing what the instrument could be. The next one's called Nefertiti, the Beautiful One has come, released in 1962. This one's a fascinating snapshot of Cecil Taylor right in the middle of his evolution. If Jazz Advance was him saying, "I'm going to bend the rules," and Unit Structures was him burning the entire rulebook, then Nefertiti is this beautiful in-between moment where you can hear him figuring out how to merge fire with lyricism. It's a trio here. Jimmy Leons on alto saxophone, who honestly becomes Cecil's most important musical partner. Andrew Cyril on drums, who's just a wizard when it comes to pushing rhythm into new territory. No bass this time, which already makes the sound feel lighter, more open, and gives Cecil more room to stretch across the keyboard. The vibe, it's still free jazz, but it's not all sharp edges. There's this lyrical, almost introspective side that comes through. Take Trance. It really does feel like you're getting pulled into this hypnotic zone where the trio builds layers of sounds that swirl around you. Then there's Call. This one's punchier, more urgent, like Cecil is tugging you forward while Leon's sax lines soar over the top. Performance-wise, the chemistry is insane. Cecil's still doing that percussive full keyboard melody, but here he's balancing it with space, with moments of quiet beauty. Leon's with his bird-inspired alto tone kind of acts like the lyrical counterweight to Cecil's intensity. And Cyril, he doesn't just keep time. He paints with rhythm. He's splashing, accenting, pulling the trio into unexpected directions. But this album is way more approachable than some of Cecil's harsher stuff. It's challenging, sure, but it's got that emotional core that makes it feel warmer, almost spiritual at times. It's like Cecil letting you see the poetry behind the storm. And critics really appreciated that balance. They saw Nefertiti as proof that Cecil wasn't just about chaos and dissonance, but about depth, emotions, and nuance. It's like standing at the edge of the free jazz revolution and catching the sunlight before the storm hits. And now we're stepping into another album called Student Studies, released in 1973. This one feels like eavesdropping on Cecil Taylor's workshop. It's like you're right there watching him build the language of free jazz in real time. By this point, Cecil's trio with Jimmy Leon's on alto sax and Andrew Cyril's on drums is basically telepathic. They'd been playing together for years, and you can tell they don't just react to each other, they anticipate each other. No bass again, which makes the entire sound feel stripped down but razor sharp. It's like nothing gets in the way of their conversations. Musically, this is pure avant-garde jazz, but not in a throw everything at the wall sense. It's more controlled chaos. The tracks unfold like living organisms. Amplitude kicks off with these jagged piano rhythms from Cecil. Leon just threads his way through them, lyrical but cutting, while Cyril constantly shifts the ground between them. Then the title track, Student Studies, feels like a masterclass in collective improvisation. It stretches out, morphs, breathes, and comes roaring back. Cecil is hammering out clusters of notes like avalanches, but he also knows when to drop into these quiet, suspenseful spaces. Leon's is soaring on top, almost like a voice, sometimes pleading, sometimes shouting. And Cyril, he's painting in rhythm, tossing accents that go off like firecrackers one second and whispering like brushers the next. For the listener, this album is raw and intense, but it's also really revealing. You can just hear the way Cecil builds structures on the fly, how the trio balances between total freedom and just enough order to make it coherent. Update with Jashan De Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Cecil Taylor, his biography and best hits. Now it's time for some trending music news. Hiroko Mina has just dropped an album that's basically a journey across time and continents. Her new album is called Beyond the Silk Road and it's out on August 25th. The concept alone is insane. She's drawing inspiration from the Silk Road, the legendary route that connects the East and the West, and she's fusing ancient traditions, contemporary composition, and world-class jazz. The opening track, Winds of Celestial Maiden, is already a standout. Hiroko teams up with Ron Carter track. The bass isn't just playing along, it's a conversation with no theater, which is this ultra-traditional Japanese performance art that UNESCO recognizes. Imagine bass lines weaving with haunting chants. There's this tension, this cosmic dialogue. It's like listening to history and jazz collide in real time. Then track 2, Sky Voice, Carried by the Wind, takes it to another dimension. She brings in Mongolian throat singing by Liu Wei. If you've never heard it, throat singing produces two tones at once. Basically sounds like somebody split into two voices at the same time. It's mesmerizing and it gives the album this expansive, almost sci-fi vibe. And the rest of the album? Every track is a world unto itself. From shimmering piano meditations to cinematic orchestral arrangements, each composition could totally stand alone. But together, they tell this sweeping story across cultures and time. Tracks like Silk Road Reverie, Floating Temple, and Nomad to Rome are like little portals. You're traveling without even leaving your chair. The sound is crisp, immersive, like you're right there in the hall with the performers. This album is more than just music. It's a journey and experience. Imagine jazz, world music, ancient traditions all mingled into one seamless emotional adventure. And that was some trending music news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Cecil Taylor, his biography and best hits. During this hour, we're going to talk about more of his best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of what's coming up. The first one's called Three Faces, released in 1978. Picture this, a sextet that's not just playing avant-garde jazz, but also sneaking in these New Orleans-inspired grooves. Tracks like Three Faces and Phase 2 are absolute showpieces. Complex rhythms, wild dynamics, and yet the ensemble just locks in. Every musician is pulling their weight, making the intense high-energy fusion that still feels cohesive. Critics loved it for that energy and the way it mixed all those musical influences. You can feel jazz's past and future colliding in real time. Now flip the page to Silent Tongues, recorded in 1974 at Montreux. This is where you see Taylor solo and unfiltered. No group, no distractions, just him at the piano unleashing everything. We are talking rapid-fire clusters, insane polyrhythms, moments of dynamic energy, alternating with almost meditative calm. The title track alone is like he's weaving melodies, textures and rhythms into this living, breathing tapestry. It's intense, mesmerizing, and honestly a little intimidating. Critics call it one of his best solo performances. It's raw, unrelenting, and beautiful all at once. And finally, an album called Fly, 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 released in 1980. This one's quieter, more intimate, and surprisingly lyrical for Taylor. You still get that avant-garde touch, but it's more about space, phrasing, subtle harmonics. The title track is a dream, delicate, spacious, meditative, like he's showing the other side of his mind, the reflective, almost tender side. The first one's called Three Faces, released in 1978. By this point, Cecil Taylor had already proven himself as a king of avant-garde jazz intensity, but here he flips the script a little by folding in these deep, almost New Orleans-style grooves underneath all the chaos. This isn't just Cecil pounding away on the piano while everyone else tries to keep up. It's an entire group moving together. The title track, Three Faces, is a monster. Sprawling, multi-layered. You get these pushing rhythms from the ensemble, and then Cecil just turns up over the top with these massive clusters of sound. Then Phase 2 takes that energy and twists it even further. They're deconstructing the first piece and reassembling it into something new. What makes this album so cool is the way it balances extremes. You've got these intricate rhythms and dense harmonies that are classic Cecil, but then out of nowhere, you hear this almost traditional groove sneaking in, like a second line parade filtering through outer space. It's such a wild fusion of the old and the new. Performance-wise, everyone's locked in at a ridiculous level. The sextet doesn't just play with Cecil, they push him, challenge him, and match his intensity. And Cecil is in peak form here. Aggressive, percussive, but also incredibly precise. You can tell he's orchestrating these huge waves of sound, but still leaving room for the band to color it in. For listeners, it's more accessible than his most abstract works because of the groove elements. You can tap your foot while your brain gets scrambled, and that's a pretty fun combo. Critics really love Three Faces for exactly that reason. It proves Cecil wasn't just about tearing everything down, he could also weave in tradition and show how the roots of jazz still lived in his wildest experiments. Now we're talking about Silent Tongues, released in 1974. If you ever want the pure, undiluted essence of Cecil Taylor, this is the record. No band, no horns, no drums, just Cecil alone at the piano at the Montreux Jazz Festival. It's like watching a thunderstorm form, explode and dissolve all in real time. This is Cecil completely unfiltered. His style, those insane rapid-fire note clusters, the polyrhythms that make you wonder if he has extra hands, everything is on display here. But what makes Silent Tongues so magical is the range. 1 second he's unleashing avalanches of sound, the next he drops into these delicate, almost whispering moments of introspection. It's like he's showing you the entire emotional spectrum of his music in one performance. The big centerpiece, of course, is the title track Silent Tongues. Sprawling and layered, moving through dynamic passages, meditative lulls, sudden shifts in rhythm. You can hear him weaving melody, texture and rhythm all at once. All three instruments living inside the piano. And the way he controls dynamics, going from volcanic roars to pin drop quiet, keeps you completely on edge. Performance-wise, this is Cecil at his most jaw-dropping. His technique is almost otherworldly. He's not just playing fast, he's building entire structures out of sound, using the piano like an orchestra. The solo format makes every tiny nuance, every accent, every shift in energy feel magnified. You can practically hear him thinking, creating, reacting all at once. For listeners, it's not easy, it's intense, it's demanding, but it's also hypnotic. It's less like listening to songs and more like experiencing a live abstract painting being made in front of you. And critics, they've been crazy over this one. Silent Nights is often called one of Cecil Taylor's greatest solo recordings, and for a good reason. It's intense, inventive, and deeply emotional. It proves that his so-called chaos isn't random at all, but highly disciplined and expressive art form. An album called Fly, 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 released in 1980. This was like the mellow, reflective side of Cecil Taylor, and it's a total gem. So picture this, it's 1980, and Taylor drops his solo studio album. Still totally avant-garde, but compared to the storms of his big ensemble works, this one feels more intimate, more meditative. It's like he's leaning in close, whispering his ideas directly to you through the piano. For example, the title track, Fly, 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 Fly. Taylor plays with spacious phrasing, delicate harmonies, and those moments where you can feel him breathing with the music. It's contemplative, almost poetic. You get to hear him exploring melody and subtle dynamics instead of throwing everything at the listener at once. And the thing is, his technique is still mind-blowing, but it's understated here. You notice the nuance, the little shifts in touch, the way he shapes each phrase. It's like seeing a sculptor slowly carving a masterpiece instead of watching a whirlwind of chisels. For someone wanting to dip their toes into Taylor's piano work, this is actually one of the most approachable albums. You get complexity, sure, but it's wrapped in a meditative lyrical vibe that's easier to follow than unit structures or silent times. Critics really love this one for that reason. They praise its intimacy, the clarity, and how it shows a different facet of Taylor's artistry. And that was some insight into some of Cecil Taylor's best hits with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Cecil Taylor, his biography, and best hits. We've come to an end of this week's episode of the Jazz Update, so now it's time to recap what we're discussing during this program. So Cecil Taylor, born in Queens, 1929. Classical training, early love for modernist composers, but then he turns that foundation into something totally his own. Not just a pianist, he was a composer, poet, this full-force artist. People call his piano style 88-tune drums because he didn't just play, he sculpted sound. And he basically helped define free jazz, pushing jazz past swing and bop into something completely unpredictable but deeply alive. Now, album by album, it's like a roadmap of his evolution. Jazz Advance, released in 1956, his debut, already fearless. You've got Steve Lacy on soprano sax, you can hear Taylor blending bop with his avant-garde edge. Looking Ahead was released in 1959. A little more accessible. He brings in vibraphone with Earl Griffiths, gives it this shimmering texture. It still pushes boundaries, but it's lighter, easier to digest if you're new to him. Unit Structures, released in 1966. This is the Free Jazz Manifesto. A full sextet, dense, atonal, rhythmically wild. Tracks like Enter Evening feel like standing in the middle of a storm made of sound. Nefertiti, The Beautiful One Has Come, was released in 1962. This is where he starts leaning lyrical. A trio setting with Jimmy Leons and Andrew Cyril. It's got this balance, still free, but you can hear emotional warmth breaking through, especially on trance. Another album called Silent Tongues, released in 1974. His live solo at Montreux. This is pure Cecil unleashed. No group, no filter. Amazing clusters, delicate whispers, everything in between. So when you put it all together, Cecil's career is like a kaleidoscope. You've got pioneering experiments, thunderous ensembles, the live raw energy, and the surprising tenderness. That's what makes him so brilliant. So that was a quick recap of everything that we discussed on this week's episode of the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. And that brings me to an end of this week's episode of the program. Don't forget, you can check out the archives of today's program on my YouTube channel, The Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan. So I'll see you again next week. Have a great week ahead.